What is going on, GBA fans? My name is Berk, and today we bring you the Week 9 of the Pick'em Crew for GBA Season 7. And of course, I am not alone. I am joined by Matty Brolick.
What is going on, everyone? You got Matty Brolick here, and I am back alongside Berk to make some picks once again.
So as you can see on the screen, last week we did pretty good. No one went negative, which is, I think, a first. But still quite a bit of red. Most of us getting the John versus Lars battle. Almost everyone getting Gator versus Geo's battle wrong. But overall, you know, most of us going positive. Us, as the hosts of the Pick'em Crew, up at number 1 and 2. So, still doing pretty good there. Although my locks of the week are pretty bad compared to everyone else. I think I'm in last for locks, so I'm not very good at that. But so, starting off Week 9, we have the Free State Torcats versus the Philadelphia Scissors, and we all have the Philadelphia Scissors picked for this game. Now, I think the reason for this is relatively self-explanatory. Don't get me wrong, Duncan has been doing pretty good. He went from 1 and 4 to 4 and 4, so he's been on a hot streak lately, but Chimp is one of the best teams we got this season. He's been extraordinarily consistent. I think he is at 6 and 2 currently, I want to say.
Yeah, I believe so as well.
Yeah, so he's doing really well, and as always, as I always say, he's got this really crazy team matchup pretty much against everybody. Kieran Black and Thunderous Eye, I can just see he's putting in a ton of work against Duncan's team. Duncan does have things like the Weavile, which can put in an immense amount of offensive pressure, but I think Chimp has ways of dealing with that, especially with mons like Fortress. Volcanion actually, you know, can take the ice moves. I just really like some of the mons he's got. Zoroark, I think, can be a pretty good mon for the team. So overall, I like the offensive matchup for Chimp this week, as I do pretty much every single week. And Chimp has been playing just so well that I think he's going to win this one. But Duncan has been really pulling it back these last 3 weeks, and that is definitely not to say that he can't win this match either.
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. Like, with Duncan, he really has been impressing me this season, and I've been saying it pretty much since the beginning, but he's really been on a hot streak, like you said, getting, I believe, 3 wins in a row. So this is a really good opportunity for him to test his skills and see if he could beat one of the best players in the league, also with a difficult team matchup. So that will be certainly a true test of skill for Duncan to see how he can really compete with the big dogs, especially considering his matchup isn't too good. But like you mentioned before, Chimpact is a really threatening matchup against Duncan here. It's really going to be tough for Duncan to deal with Chimpact's onslaught of offense. And Chimp just has really solid synergy and natural bulk on his team as well that, you know, defensively can always put up a decent fight regardless of, you know, what his opponent really has, because he's just got such great synergy and bulk, like I said, that it's hard for his team to just be completely mowed through by like a certain Pokemon or a certain couple Pokemon. So I see Chimpact winning this game, but it would definitely be interesting if Duncan could knock off Chimpact and continue his really nice win streak.
That it would. So up next we have the St. Louis Rampardos versus the Florida Gators. So why don't you take this one?
Okay, this was a pretty tough one to call because Dan has been doing much better at this point in the season than he initially was. Gator has like sort of slowed down a little bit. He's still doing well, especially for a first-time coach, but he's not really killing it like he was at the very beginning. But that could be, you know, for other reasons. Maybe he had a couple off weeks. Maybe he, you know, got hacked or had tough matchups. Whatever it is, I do think that Gator will probably pull the win this week over Dan. I do like Gator's team a little bit against Dan's team. I'm just not a huge fan of how slow Dan's team is. I think that may come to hurt him in this match, considering Gator's team does have a decent amount of fast and offensive threats on it. So overall, I could see this game going both ways, but I'm going to go with Gator.
So I'm actually going to disagree, and I'm going to say Dan can take this. Dan is, you know, when everyone seems to vote against Dan, he seems to pull out a win. And that's kind of what I was going with here. I saw a lot of people voting for the Gators, and I was like, you know, I feel like this is the week Dan's going to pull another upset. Overall, I actually do like Dan's team matchup if he can keep Webbs off the field. Victini is an extraordinarily huge threat against Gator's team because Gator does not really have a switch into Victini. Heatran is probably his best, but even then Victini, you know, gets Brick Break, and Heatran doesn't even like taking Bolt Strike. So if Dan can use Victini well, and I know he can, I feel like that can clutch out a win for him because, again, Gator really does not have a switch in for it. And then you couple that with the likes of Terrakion, which can get rid of Heatran. I feel like if he can keep up the offensive pressure, then he should be able to take out a win this week. And he's been using Terrakion very well. He's been using Victini very well. So yeah, his team is slower than Gator's for sure. His team is slower than most. And if he does not manage to keep the hazards off his side of the field, I can see him losing this battle. Like, I was kind of split as well, but I am going to go with the St. Louis Rampardos. So up next, we have the Tampa Bay Luxrays versus the Borussia Don fan. And pretty much all of us going for mono, except for Nick. Nick's pulling for Lars. And I am voting for mono because mono has been doing so dang well this season. And he's been taking home a few losses these past few weeks. I think he's going to really want to solidify his spot in the playoffs. Make sure he goes 7-2, not 6-3. Kind of distinguish himself from the rest of his division more so. And then looking at, the team matchup, mono has, these really big threats for Lars' team. Buzzwole, Lars does not really have a good switch in for that. And then you also look at things like, I actually really like, as always, I usually like Jirachi because Jirachi just plays his overall very utility role. It can fill pretty much whatever mono needs, and he's been using that really, really well. So I don't see this week being any differently. And then defensively, he has ways of taking on Magearna. They're not the best, and Magearna is just an extraordinarily huge threat to any team. So if Lars can use Magearna well this week, I can see him winning. But overall, I am going to go with mono in the Tampa Bay Luxrays.
Yeah, I'm going with a similar sentiment here. Mono is coming off of a big 6-0 victory from last week. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that he's going to win this week, but it just shows that he's ready to get back on track after a couple rough weeks. So with that being said, just knowing how good mono is, I think that the likelihood of him winning is fairly high. He played Lars earlier in the season, right?
Yeah, mono won 2-0 against Lars last time.
Yeah, so mono does already have a victory against Lars, but as many of you who do play in the draft format probably do know, it really isn't that easy to beat the same person twice. So I feel like the advantage always slightly goes to the person who lost in the rematch, but mono, like we said, has just been such a powerful coach this season that it's really difficult to vote against him. And because of that, I'm going to pick mono again over Lars.
Yeah, so up next we have the Milwaukee Sawsbucks versus the San Diego Chim Chargers. Yeah, so why don't you take this one?
Well, I believe this is also a rematch.
I think these are all rematches?
Yeah, I think these may all be rematches.
Yeah, they're all rematches.
Exactly, they're probably all like a set divisional games. That makes sense. Now, the first time these two played, I was saying that I just think that Steve's team is really lacking in a lot of areas. And MV's team isn't my favorite, but with how creative MV gets with his teams, I think that he could easily play around Steve's team just because Steve's team, like I said, I believe is lacking in a lot of areas. So it's going to be tough for him to deal with all the crazy innovation that MV brings to the table. And like I said, even though MV's team isn't my favorite team, I do think that it's overall a lot more solid than Steve's is. So with that being said alone, plus the fact that MV's just a great player and coach, I do think MV's probably going to take this win again.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's too much to say about this battle. MV's been playing great. Steve has not. And I know Steve, towards the end of the season, seems to pick up a few more wins. He brings some crazier stuff that catches opponent off guard, but it's really hard to catch MV off guard. He's been playing well, and I don't think he's going to want to give up a loss here to Steve. Plus, I mean, granted, Steve is not going to make the same mistakes last time. He's not going to set up Trick Room for MV's Alolan Muck. I don't think. I hope not. Steve, don't set up Trick Room for Alolan Muck again. That was bad. But I just see MV pulling out another win. So anyway, up next, we've got the San Jose Sharpedos versus the San Francisco Giants, and I am voting for the San Jose Sharpedos. We're really split on this battle, and I can see this going either way. Gia's been doing much better these past few weeks, and Tom's been kind of faltering. He's 3-5, taking home some rough losses, especially the 6-0 loss last week. And I feel like it is definitely hard to turn around a 6-0 loss the previous week and pull out a win. I'm still going to go with Tom. I think his team matchup overall, like, it is hard to win the second time around. But overall, I just like Tom's team matchup. I mean, Thunderous T is still this gigantic threat against Gio's team. And if he can use that to his advantage, make sure that if like Rhyperior comes, he can take that out and just kind of gain a lot of momentum using things like Thunderous, using things like Azelf. He should be able to prevent Gio from doing any sort of setup, make sure he can keep the walls whittled down. Overall, I'm going to go with Tom, but I was actually very split on this, so I could see it going the other way.
Yeah, I was also very, very split on this one because, like I said before, winning a rematch is not necessarily an easy thing to do, especially because Gio's team has improved a bit since they played the first time. But I do agree with you in Tom's team matchup being really threatening towards Gio's. His fast offensive threats really put a lot of pressure on Gio's walls because they have not only the power but also the coverage to break most of them down. I'm just not really that much of a fan of Gio's team and the way he's been playing this season. He has been doing a little better than he was earlier on, but still not too great. And Tom, coming off of a 6-0 loss, is, he needs to get, I mean, he doesn't need to, but he's going to really want to get this win coming off of that rough of a loss, considering the fact that he knows this is a winnable game. He's won this matchup before. So I think he's going to come out guns blazing to try to make sure he really does win this and go 4-5 instead of faltering all the way down to 3-6. But like, this one was probably the one I was the most split on this week just because Gio has been playing better. I just could see it going either way.
So up next we have the New Orleans Pelipers versus the Alola Athletic, and most of us are going with the New Orleans Pelipers. Blue actually going with Alola Athletic, so why don't you talk about this battle?
John has just been having a heck of a season. Like, I haven't seen him play this well in a little while now, maybe for like the past 2 seasons or so. I don't recall him really being this consistent, which is great. It's really awesome to see him do so well again, because he was always one of my favorites to watch when I first started following these draft league the draft format. So that being said, I think both guys have pretty cool and powerful teams that could both put a lot of work in against one another. The threat of sand offense is very threatening, although John does have a Skarmory. But I still think that if the Skarmory can be aptly played around, then I think the sand offense is a pretty big threat. Obviously, John does have the Tapu Bulu, which could weaken the Earthquakes from the Excadrill, which is pretty cool. So this match could go either way matchup-wise, but I do think that John has been the more impressive coach all around. He is way more experienced than Callum in the format. Although Callum has been having a pretty solid first season, I just still think that the odds are with John here, and that's why I decided to go with him this week.
Yeah, I just really like John's team matchup. You say sand offense can do a lot. I just don't see it.
Yeah, probably
because not only does Excadrill get defensively countered by things like Skarmory, it also gets offensively checked by things like Infernape. Because Infernape can easily run like Specs Vacuum Wave or Choice Band and Mach Punch to kind of prevent Excadrill from doing any shenanigans. Same with Tyranitar. So
True.
I just really like John's team matchup because you look at Tapu Bulu, and the really only good switch that Callum has for that is Crobat, which then John has things like Melodic to deal with it. He's got Jolteon to deal with it. He's got Gudra, Porygon Z. He's got so many things to take down Crobat. And
right.
Then if Crobat goes down, Callum has to deal with things like Tapu Bulu, has to deal with things like Infernape that's much harder to offensively check. So if John can use the mons he's been using well already this season, well this week, then I see John pulling out a pretty big win.
Yep.
So up next, we've got the San Francisco Arcaniners versus the Pittsburgh Piratas, and all of us are going for the San Francisco Arcaniners. In fact, 4 of us locking, as well as the fan lock this week, and I think it's for really good reason. George, this hasn't been George's best season. It's been a little bit shaky, but I think he's pulling it back together. And Tup has been having a really bad season, and I think George is 5-3. So George is really going to want to pull out a big win this week so that he can keep up with Mono, make sure that he can get a playoff spot, because he's only 1 win ahead of people like Gator and Duncan. So if he can pull out a big win here, he can kind of separate himself from them and hopefully start to secure himself a spot. And I think this is a very winnable match for George this week.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that Tubbs' record kind of speaks for itself right now. 0-8. Shout-outs to Rizzy Powell. I do think that George, like you said, is really going to be looking to grab this next win because it's a win that he's already gotten earlier on in the season, and it's a win that he knows he probably can get based on how Tubbs been doing and knowing how good he is. So it's going to be pretty important for him to really stay up there in the playoff race and not have to worry towards the end of the season about maybe not making it or not getting a certain seed that he wants. So that plus the fact that George, his team is just, I think, overall better than Tubbs, even though I do think Tubbs has a solid team. But yeah, I'm just going to have to go with George here, and I also picked it as my lock.
Moving on to the last battle of the week, we have the Detroit Steelwings versus the Utah Jasmine. So why don't you take this battle?
All right, so this one was definitely another really hard one to call because Crimson has just been playing so well. He's definitely stepped it up this season on multiple fronts. And although I did go with the Utah Jasmine, I could easily see this one going either way because I do think that Crimson does have the matchup a little bit. But I do know Necro to be a really, really good player. And he's obviously newer to the league, so he has a lot to prove. And he's been doing well. So I am going to go with Necro here, but this one's a really tough one to call because Crimson has been playing so well, like I mentioned before. So I could see it going either way, but I'm just going to go with the Utah Jasmine here.
Yeah, I was also pretty split on this. I decided to go with the Detroit Steelwings. It kind of came down to like the offensive matchup, the matchup in general. And overall, I just like Crimson's team against Necros. He's got ways of checking Manaphy. He has ways of checking Zapdos. Same with Reuniclus. Like all of Necro's really offensive mons can be checked some way or another by Crimson's team. And then you look at some of the offense that Crimson has. Volcarona is this like consummate threat. Very hard to deal with. And then you have some of the walls, Slowbro. And I feel like if Crimson can play as well as he's been these past few weeks, I think he should be able to pull out a win. That's not to say Necro can't. Necro's been playing well. And he's a very, very tough opponent for Crimson. But I think Crimson can pull out a win. So I am going to go with Crimson, the Detroit Steelwings. So anyway, that is going to wrap up the Week 9 Pick'em crew for the GBA Season 7. As always, please leave your picks down in the comment section below. Let us know who you're picking for and why you're picking for him. Matty, anything left to say?
Nope, just like Berk said, continue to stay involved. It makes it a lot more fun for us. And yeah, hope you are all excited for another week of games just like we are. And we will be back with you in about a week. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Later.